When you're ready.
Okay. Welcome to Oxfordshire. Thank you very much for joining us, and really thank you for signing up. I hope that you enjoy this webinar and enjoy. My daughter. It is fantastic weather, and we are really thankful that it is really good weather because we wanted to start it outside. So under normal circumstances, my husband and I, we would be doing shows, we would be meeting the public, and obviously our whole world has changed, and we thought we would take the opportunity to stop and reevaluate and really have an amazing gift of time given to us to change what we're doing. So we've decided to refit our workshops and rebuild, and that's what we've been doing for 6 weeks. So we thought we would share it with you and really let you see it from the ground level up and see what we're doing. So my husband and I are a husband and wife team. We're both artists. My husband is an antique furniture restorer and has had his own business for over 30 years really. But we work together very much, and we decided to build this log cabin. It's Norwegian log. They built it literally log by log, which was fantastic. If you were here, you could really smell the pine. It's just brilliant. And then my workshop. So welcome to my workshop. It's all new at the moment, which is very squeaky clean. Everybody's told me it's got to stay this way, but come back in a year and it might be slightly different. I thought
just do casting, we do everything. So we do fabrication, we make things by hand. I don't know if Joe can show that. So we make things with wire and obviously metal, and we mill it all out. I also work with opal miners, and I've been working with opal miners for over 10 years. Are they there? So what we do is we work very much with the customers, and this is the virtual world is a very new place to me, as you may well have noticed. Generally what I do is I work on appointments with customers. I've been working with miners for over 10 years. I have a passion for opal. There are some on Handmade in Britain, as you've seen, and they're all unique. They're all one-off pieces. And I just want to show you one of the pieces that are on Handmade in Britain. And it's black opal. It's from Lightning Ridge, and it's available, but just thought I'd show that to you. And it's all grey on the back, whereas one of the other opals is from Queensland, and that's got ironstone on the back, so it's slightly different stone. And what I generally do is when we do shows is we make up a few pieces, but we take the loose stone with us so that people can see, because all of the opals are they're unique, they're one-off pieces. The other way that we work is we have customers bring stones and bring pieces to show me. So this customer is a classic example really. She was going to a wedding and wanted to have a pair of earrings to give an artistic opinion of the windows that were in the palace. And we designed a pair of earrings for them. And then a customer may well bring a stone, and we start with drawings and take an evaluation of them, and then carry on and do the drawings and the designs, and then finalize the paint ups and show them the pieces. So that's really an overview. We also do valuations and evaluations for people with historic pieces of jewellery, and we'll either remodel them for them, or we'll just do an evaluation or buy them from them as well. Before we go into, so I really just wanted to show you the kind of world that is normal for us, and because the world has changed, we decided to partner up with Handmade in Britain and to really design an entry piece of jewellery, a collection for you that would be available for everybody. So although some of my more expensive pieces are on Handmade in Britain for you to see, there is now an entry collection which I thought we'd show you the first process of the cuttlefish casting. And just before we go into the video, for the jewellers that may be watching, for me, it's really where I start on a collection. I may well do the cuttlefish casting, and under normal circumstances I'd carry on with cuttlefish casting for a few shows and really get the customer hold the pieces and to decide whether or not the collection is really good to carry on with. But because we're working in this situation, I thought I would take it one step further and really produce a collection for Handmade in Britain. So
a couple of our participants want to know, what is cuttlefish casting and how is that work different from your expensive work?
Great. So cuttlefish casting is actually a fish. Obviously, it's dead once we get to use it, which is good. It's a very basic way of casting, and how I use cuttlefish in both the expensive pieces and the entry pieces is it's a brilliant way to start a master. It means that you can do it in house. You can adapt the mold. I carve my masters in silver so that they're a good weight. And I've really used it for over 30 years, and it's brilliant. And then going forward, I'll show you now actually, I would then go from the cuttlefish casting, and then I would send my master off to centrifugal casting. So I use Konya in Birmingham and Castaway, and they would make a silicone mold. So normally in the film you'll see a cuttlefish, but then I would go on and produce something like this to then be able to produce a limited collection for we know is consistent. Any more questions?
Good afternoon. I hope you've enjoyed the live stream so far. We were going to cast over there, but we really didn't feel that the forge would be ready at this point. So we thought we'd take a risk and do it outside, and hopefully it will work. It's not too windy today. We've still got a lovely, beautiful day in Oxfordshire. Very well ventilated, so that's good. And I'll just talk to you about some cuttlefish casting. So first of all, we use the skeleton of the cuttlefish, so it is dead. We're not casting on live animals. And I generally buy mine wholesale, but you can buy them from a pet shop or from any wholesaler really. It's anybody who sells food for budgies, because they eat cuttlefish. So what you're looking for is a nice fat, well-fed cuttlefish. So if they're too skinny, they tend to be concave on the inside, whereas when they're nice and rotundal, then you've got a lovely material and surface to be able to play with. So what you would do is you would cut the cuttlefish in half, and then on some sandpaper or slightly textured surface, you'd make it nice and flat so they go together and they fit well. It's very fibrous material, so it's always good to keep blowing the dust away and keeping it nice and clean. Now you will find on cuttlefish, when you cut it, there's two sides to the cuttlefish. There's a slightly coarser side and there's a slightly finer side. So on here you would be pushing the cuttlefish pattern. You want to go on to the finer material. So your master, you want to push the front of it, where all the detail is, into the finer part of the cuttlefish, and then you'll pick up a better casting. When you've got it to that stage, you would then take your master and you would push it into the cuttlefish, and you would put locating pins into one side where the master is, so that when you push the other side onto the mould, it will connect really well. You'd also need to just, before you do that, you also need to just put your locating slots on the top so you know where your master's going to be. So you would push it in, make sure it's nice and tight, and then you just take your slot over the other side, and then you start to put your sprue which is a word for, basically it's the piece of metal that gets poured into the top of the mould and it's molten. Now mine's a flat back mould. When you've got a solid shape, you might need to just push it in halfway and then push the other one on the top so you get the whole shape. Sometimes when they're flat back, you don't want to disturb the impression, so I sometimes use a wax stick just to get the master out. Might be a bit dusty. And it just comes out, and that means it doesn't make a mess of the impression that you've just made. So again, you would just make sure that you fill that and you just break into the master. That way you've got a nice solid shape to pour into. The other thing you'd need to think about is this is a pocket of air. So when you're pouring molten metal into the mould, you want the pocket of air to be able to escape. So we put vent holes into the master just to allow, it doesn't need to be big, it doesn't need to be a great big gouge in the side of your impression, it just needs to have enough space just to let air go through. I then generally point them upwards because the metal's going down and that pushes the air out the top. The other thing to consider is when you have a master, this is called gravity casting. So obviously it's all in the name and the molten metal has been poured down the mould. When you have a master, you want to think about the way the metal is going to fall. So if you were to have this master pushed in at a horizontal angle, the molten metal is going to be forced into the sides of the mould, and these tend to burn, and it's just a one hit casting. So that would be fighting against the metal, whereas something like going vertical it's naturally going to want to fall into the mould, so it will just flow as it's molten and it solidifies as it goes in. So we would then push these two together, and you've got your locating pins in there already, hopefully should go in. And then with your file or a broken burr, just make sure you've got that pattern following upwards, and then again you just match that screw going in the other side. Now if you've got a three-dimensional model, you would obviously have an impression going on this side of the mould as well, so you would be doing exactly the same as you've done on the other side and joining up with the master. Because this is a flat back, we've only got a screw going on one side. It's also worth mentioning your masters, when you're doing cuttlefish casting, it's gravity casting, and it's where it's centrifugal, which I think I spoke about before. It will go into undercuts. With cuttlefish casting, it's very simple moulds, so no undercuts on the masters, not too intricate. The cleaner the shape, the better. And then you put these sides down, and then you can bind it with binding wire, or I tend to use elastic bands, so good health and safety. The reason why I do that is simply because it's quicker. If it was binding wire, you have to really make sure that you're cutting it with wire cutters and things, whereas once you've quenched the mould, as long as you don't burn the elastic band, it's very quick to get the mould off, so I use it purely for speed. So when you're setting up the master and ready for starting to melt, it's a bit like baking really. As long as you've got all of your prep done and you know exactly where you're standing with all your different moulds and your different things, then it's actually relatively straightforward. So you want to make sure that your mould is set up, it's secure, it's away from all the heat, and it's 90 degrees. So when you pour the molten metal in, it's just going to pour straight away. Now obviously we are outside, so hopefully we're going to get the temperature hot enough. I've made a small forge, and the idea really is to be able to keep the heat into the forge and also allow the oxygen to flow, because when the forge is starved of oxygen, the flame goes out. So we hopefully okay, flux, you put flux onto your mould first, your crucible. It helps the metal melt. And when you first start up, it's not a bad idea just to gently warm up the mould. Warm up the crucible, because they do have a tendency to crack. Hopefully that's gone in. Soon see. Right, so you just take it out of there, straight into the bucket. Oh dear. Okay, now for the moment of truth. Okay, fantastic. So you can see that it's a one casting really, it just burns the material. And let's just see what that looks like. Just give it a wash. Now what you can see is the back of that has got the same pattern as the cuttlefish, so it's the rougher side, and then when you turn it over you can see it's a beautiful smooth surface and makes the master very easy to clean up, the casting very easy to clean up, and all this is just where the airs come through with the casting, but that will clean up beautifully. So if you'd like to join us for the live stream again, and you'll see what I do with these pieces and how they finish up and what the collection finally looks like. Thank you.
So what we then do from that is obviously clean them up and I generally put them all on a little stick, clean them all up, and then assemble them into some really nice pieces of jewellery. So we've put them onto Handmade in Britain, and it's the only place they're actually available at the moment. So we're leaving them with you guys, Pish. It's been really nice to work with you, and I hope your customers love this as an introductory collection of jewellery. We've got some 9 carat and some silver, so the pieces are all solid, and I think all the weights and everything are all on the website. But
Lisa,
do you have any more questions, please?
yes. So is there a much shrinkage between the size of the master which you cast in the cuttlefish and the pieces from the centrifugal process?
Okay, so the shrinkage, you can have about a 10% shrinkage actually, but the shrinkage with cuttlefish, it really depends on the pour. So if you were to pour really fast, you'll get a really full mold. If you pour slowly, it can wither, it starts to burn, so you will get a smaller casting. But it's really down to the melting and the pouring.
And what are your inspirations when it comes to design?
Okay, so my work's really eclectic. If left to my own devices, if I'm working with opals, it's really from the stone onwards. And if I'm designing other things, really architecture and actually nature. But I really love balance. I really love the way things balance, either sort of asymmetric or in symmetry as well. There's a piece here that's on, again, I've just started to put the perfect balance onto Handmade in Britain, but this is a collection that I've worked with for a very long time, and the balance between the positive and negative shapes I love, and I get a real thrill with that throughout all of my design. But again, the eclecticness really is about the client. So for the last 17 years I've been working with people, and although this is a real jump for me, Pish, because I'm really interactive with people, and I sit down with my clients and I really work with where they come from. So how they want to wear a piece of jewellery, the kind of personalities they are, whether they want something for high days and holidays or whether they want to wear something every day is really important to me. So I don't know how we do this virtually, but for me it's all about the customer's experience and the customer's interaction, and you know, the feedback really from your world to whether or not the customers love this collection and how they feel about it would be really, really important to me. Yeah, carry on.
So are there any recommendations for a basic torch? Because one of the jewelers, she says that she has a micro torch, and I don't know whether this would be, suitable. So what recommendation can you offer?
Okay, so for my torch, I've taken the nib off because I'll break them if I just on the bench. But this is a micro weld. They're fantastic torches for jobbing, for really getting into small everyday work really. But actually what I use is a propane torch, and I've used it, which is what we were casting with. It's brilliant for basic casting. It's brilliant with a smaller nozzle for silver work. If you want to work with platinum and you want to melt platinum, then I'd say oxyacetylene is really the way forward. But as a start off, a microweld is you can do a lot of things with a microweld.
Lisa, and so why did you decide on cuttlefish casting? Is this kind of a special technique, or are there any other casting techniques which you can shed some light on? And why did you come up that you want to do cuttlefish casting?
Of course, yeah, no problem. I actually love casting. We do casting quite a lot here with in all kinds of aspects. With James, we do electroforming and various different aspects of casting, his metalwork as well, which is great fun. But really, for me, with jewellery, the cuttlefish casting is a way to start to get a feel for a master and a mould. I mean, even to be honest, even the Perfect Balance collection started off as a cuttlefish casting, just to sort of see how the shapes worked and whether they fitted. So I can show you actually. I've got both of them here. So the things that I like is to interlock, and with cuttlefish casting you can get the masters to really connect and to really see how they balance. And I just wanted to play around with that when I started. And I thought for your YouTube, it was a really good method for somebody, if they wanted to do cuttlefish casting at home, you can. It's not expensive. It's actually good fun. Apart from your workshop starts smelling like wet dogs, you know, it's great. They go into my husband's workshop, it smells beautiful. It's all French polish and wax, and they come in here and it's, Mum, it smells like wet dogs. I've got used to the smell now, but it doesn't help if you'd like your children to start at the bench, because they never come anywhere near you. But the casting here it's really simple, and it also helps with the end product, because I can produce a collection of jewellery which is a fantastic entry level for people, so that they can enjoy without having to spend a considerable amount of money, really. And then the other type of casting, really, Pierce, is to go from that to centrifugal. So it would be uneconomic for me to cast every piece for you to sit on to Handmade in Britain. But once I've got the master perfect and the weight perfect, then I can send it off to Birmingham and they can cast centrifugal casting, and that's silicone rubbers. So these would last for a multiple of castings, and you'd get a bag of bits back effectively, and then you can clean them up. And I very often then use those silver masters or models and rework them and do the same thing again. So it gives you a lot of variety, actually.
So this brings me to my next question. So the cuttlefish casting can only be used once. You can't use more than once.
Yeah. I did before I did this demonstration for yourself. I was starting to develop the collection. I was able to get 2 castings out of one cuttlefish for these shapes, and you can do simple multiples. So for this is a master, and it's just got a single sprue. But I was able to get two castings out of cuttlefish, but you would be very hard pressed to get more than that.
So if I understand the process correctly, so your first prototype is from a cuttlefish casting, and
I'd make it in silver first, and
exactly.
then cuttlefish casting.
And then the mold has been created. Exactly. And then how do you how do you decide on the designs? Because what designs I've seen the latest ones is quite contemporary, and then the circles you've used. So that was the inspiration I wanted to ask you. What was the inspiration behind this? And besides geometric, how detailed can you go in the cuttlefish casting when you're creating a design?
You can put quite a lot of detail in. But one thing you have to understand is undercuts are just a no-no with cuttlefish, because the metal can pour, but if you can imagine, it's pouring into something that actually burns. So as it's going into the mold, it's also burning. So if it then has to work really hard to fill that mold, you have to pour it in really quick. You almost need to sort of throw it down into the cuttlefish casting. But the chances are, if it's too detailed, it will already have started to burn and you won't get that detail. Doesn't mean you can't then re-engrave that detail onto the metal, but you can do that. I mean, you can rework the piece, so you can get a basic mold. I did think about these. In fact, this is actually a really good example. Actually, if I show you this, the master, I made the master, and I'll probably do it under the microscope, under the magnifier, so you can see. So we had the basic casting. Oh, I'm coming up now. Sorry. Had the basic casting, and the cuttlefish would pick up on the shape, but it wouldn't have picked up on the engraving inside the circles. So that detail was applied after the cuttlefish casting, because it wouldn't have worked. So it will get the impression. What it loves is really nice straight edges or underlying just gentle curves, but it wouldn't want to have really, really fine impressions. So this, in fact, I can show you the start. It's quite a funny start, really, but the start for the cuttlefish casting is actually here. So this collection, I really started playing around. I wanted the shape. I loved the lozenge. I thought it was a really pleasing shape. It's a nice shape to hold, and I started playing around with different designs. I really liked some quite funky shapes, actually. But again, I knew if we were going to do something like this into the cuttlefish, it wouldn't pick up detail. This would be too fine. So it was a process of elimination and just simplifying. With the more refined pieces, it's very easy to get into the detail and to really start to play around with overcomplicated shapes. And when you're doing cuttlefish, it's about simplifying. It's one of the reasons I like doing them in silver first. So I'll start with a silver shape, and I'll get the pendant motor, which we've taken down today. But we start carving it all out and making sure it all really feels right before we cast.
So is it correct to understand that the cuttlefish casting is sort of a testing stage for you to see how the design will cast?
For me, yes. Unless I'm doing something like a signet ring, and then I'll often do the signet rings and I'll make them in cuttlefish, and that would be the finished piece for the customer. Obviously cleaned up. It wouldn't have the pattern or anything on the signet ring. I'll show you some of it actually. So something like this. These are cuttlefish, and they would go straight to the customer. So they're just models that I've made, and I would, if the customer wanted a signet ring, and I've made up loads of different shapes and playing around, and sorry, it's covered in fingerprints. But something like that would be made in silver. I'd cuttlefish it, I'd clean it all up, and then if the customer wanted something like a signet ring, I would make that as a finished piece, and I'd cast that here, because I've been casting signet rings for years, and a lot of times, sometimes people will want to use their gold. In fact, very often I do a lot of refining of people's gold. So I'll take all the bits and melt it all down, realloy all their metal from 9 carat up to 18, or a collection of different carats. And especially for signet rings and pieces that they want to give for maybe 21st birthday presents, we'd be able to do that in cuttlefish as well for them.
So you have shown us the process with silver. So what happens with gold? Would you do it the same way if you had to use gold for the cuttlefish casting?
Exactly the same way. Yeah, you just need to make sure that your crucibles are different, so you keep your crucibles separate. Otherwise, you contaminate your metal.
Sorry to be so ignorant. So when you say crucible, so
oh, sorry, Prish. The little bowl that you mount the metal in. So I've got my little dishes that are well, this is an old one. So I use this for it's flux, but so I don't use this anymore for casting, but we'd have different ones of these, for some for silver, some for gold, 9, 18 carat, and we use them for that. But yeah, exactly the same process for gold.
fantastic. It's very fascinating. So was this your first live Zoom webinar or something like that?
Can't you tell? Is anybody still watching? Sorry.
There are people watching, and I think everybody is from the creative background, all supporters of craft. So I understand, if you were nervous a little bit, it does not matter. So don't worry about this. Our community is very forgiving. So I can vouch for that. I've been watching things like that. So what are your, I think we should wrap it up a little bit, because I think I've covered a lot of questions. But I just wanted to know, what are your rest of the plans for 2020? Where are you taking this collection forward?
Well, to be honest, we're really in transition here. It's been a really interesting time for us, and I know we've talked about this before, but the craftsman, my husband and I, were both artists. We've lived all of our married life together, working within our own field, and the time we live in is a very interesting one. We've had to change. I've had to adapt. I mean, just the massive learning curve I've had with yourself, just joining Handmade in Britain and working out how this all works is a massive learning curve. And I think as a self-employed person, we juggle everything. We're accountants, we're PR, we're makers, we're everything to everybody, and then to throw in the virtual world is a very interesting planet to come to. So I've really enjoyed working with you, Pierce. I have to say, Handmade in Britain has been a fantastic platform for me, and the little designer collection that we have, I'd love to leave it on Handmade in Britain. I'd love to develop it a little bit more. We have some bracelets and some rings that we'd like to put on, and really learn how to connect with the public in a much more virtual way. This year we are actually opening a shop. We did wonder whether or not it was going to happen, but we're opening a shop in Woodstock for 2 weeks for a pop-up shop, which is the last 2 weeks in August. So that will be fantastic. That will be to meet real people for the first time again this year, which will be brilliant. And obviously we're working with you guys at Waterbury as well, which again will be a fantastic show for us. It was brilliant last year, and I'm sure it will be brilliant again for next year now. But yeah.
Thanks, Lisa. Good luck for the shop, and I hope, yes, of course, next year we plan to come to Waterbury as well. Thank you so much for showing us the Cuttlefish casting, and as a non-jeweler, I think it was so fascinating for me to watch, and I'm sure for the viewers as well. Next week we have Olivia J. Holland. We'll go to her knitting studio, and she does amazing knitting scarves and accessories for both men and women. Thank you everyone for joining us, and
thank you.
Look forward to seeing you again next week. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye. Oh.